when we can rag on Star Trek. So I'm gonna talk about Star Trek, and then also the broader issue around how current franchises are made, etc. So you would recall for a couple of months ago, I was absolutely gushing about the third season of Star Trek Picard. That I've even watched it more than once because I thought it really captured Star Trek at its core. Yeah, there were some criticisms afterwards that it was, rehashing old material in a way, but I thought they did it in a way that was really respectful and provided a good endpoint for the cast of the next generation. So I thought that was done really well, and I think that was reflected in the fact that the showrunners on that show actually were like the showrunner was an intern on the next generation, so he actually knows how to write the scripts. So and that clearly showed. And so flash forward a couple of months, and now Star Trek: Strange New Worlds, which I did enjoy the first season more or less. I thought it was a good show, but this season has just been really underwhelming. But it kind of reached the crescendo, no pun intended here, by having a completely musical episode. Now, I'm not necessarily against musicals, but musical and Star Trek don't go together. And it's not to say that it wasn't well produced, that the cast sung their songs really well. It was all the choreography was fine and everything, but it just doesn't work. And I think what it is that, with the exception of that third season of Star Trek Picard, I think the problem is that a lot of the current producers of Star Trek don't actually understand the core of what Star Trek's about. So the Gene Roddenberry school of Star Trek actually dabbled in lots of different genres, but at the core there was the philosophy of Star Trek, the exploration of humanity, the human condition, how we are in the future. So it kind of had a serious core to it, even if they had like a comedic episode, for instance. But this kind of, to me, suggests that they wanted to do the musical and then slapped the badge of Star Trek on it. That's how it comes across. And I'm not even like I'm singling out this episode because it was such a farce of an episode watching it, but it also impacted other episodes in Star Trek Strange New Worlds as well, where, like, for instance, I watched the series finale this morning because I can't get enough, it would seem. And it was a good episode, funnily enough, but not because it was a Star Trek episode. It was because it was a horror action episode with the label of Star Trek on it. So think of that as a jarring sort of week by week, going between episodes, where one week you've got this farcical musical and then you've got a horror action episode the next week. I just despair with this sort of stuff because I figure unless you actually bring people in that want to respect the actual franchise ideals, you can modernize it. But you've got to understand the core of what it's about. It's a bit like, I've ranted about what went wrong with the Star Wars sequels, and it's largely because they didn't follow, what George Lucas had done in terms of his philosophy and all that. And I just find that overall, this is how a lot of modern entertainment is these days. And I just wish that they wouldn't necessarily take up old franchises only because they're known quantities. If they're going to do this sort of stuff, just do new stuff. Like, it would come across better.
Yeah, I kind of have to agree with you. I think the idea and the thinking behind it is great. And look, there's probably a part of me, even though I repel at the idea, that makes me think that maybe this will become a classic episode, but not for you and me, but for the new audience. And I say this from, I think for me, the most challenging sci-fi situation I've had to deal with is classic Doctor Who versus the new Doctor Who. And there's nothing wrong with the new Doctor Who, and to your point, it's written by fans of the original. They had to change the format to go with modern times. They had to change many things about it. But I would say now that where Doctor Who is at is it's no longer Doctor Who. And I think that these things come with a certain level of risk, and you end up, if you're not careful, all you're really doing is just badging something that kind of has roots somewhere back in the past but has nothing to do with the past. And I like the idea of actually a Star Trek musical. And in the modern age, I think, the thing is that when you in time and I in time go back and watch these series, that'll be the episode we skip when we binge. Like, but when we have 10 friends around, it'll be the one we put on, and we'll all be like partying while it's on and singing along. And so I kind of think that's the modern thing. But is it Star Trek? No, it's not Star Trek as we know it, Ben.
Which kind of then leads me back to the point of just do a new thing. And I guess that's the biggest issue with modern Hollywood in general, is that they simply will not take a risk on doing something new. Where that, to me, like, if you take that risk, you could you strike gold. That's what they used to do. Where did Star Wars and Star Trek come from to begin with? They came out of nowhere. There wasn't any. I mean, yes, Star Wars had, it was based on other things, but it was packaged in a way that was brand new. So it has been done before, but this risk-averse nature of things, like, just leave well enough alone. Leave the franchise alone.
But there's a business decision in it as well. And as I always say, the guys in sales, right, in an on-demand world go, well, if we do this and it appeals to a whole new audience, maybe they'll go back and discover the 50 years back catalogue we've got.
Yep. Yep.
And I think you and I feel the same way about that. How about just do something new? Because, seriously, I'll stop watching Star Trek post 2020 or, 2023 at this rate. But, it's the way the future is.
And one last point, and this is the reverse point to that, which is that apparently younger generations can't watch the original series because they find it's too cringy, too sexist, too out of touch. But it's like, yeah, I get that. And look, I even had that reaction in the 80s because my first experience with Star Trek was not with the original series. It was with the movies that had the original series characters in it. So at the time I was watching the films that had really good production value. And then I started watching the original series episodes and I was like, why is it like this? And it took a little while to but you kind of have to, if you can accept that it's a product of its time, then you understand where its strengths are, because at the time it was state of the art. But again, I don't think that rationale is a justification for making new stuff that supposedly shites on the old stuff, because apparently it's gone out of vogue and it's gone out of touch.
Totally agree.
So that's my rant for this week.
I wouldn't call it a rant, Ben. I'd say it's a pretty careful analysis. But, geez, it's tragic what's happening out there in Hollywood.
Yeah, and and one other final point is that I actually feel for anyone that is growing up now, because I feel like, and you as well, I'm sure, we grew up with an embarrassment of riches in terms of pop culture, movies, TV shows, music, where it was driven by the artists. Yes, there was a business. The business did drive it as well, but there was more of an equilibrium there. And now I just feel like anyone coming up through it, I don't know why you would be interested in half of this stuff, unless that's all you had and you didn't know any better.
Completely agree. It's a very bleak world, but I guess it'll take for our generation to go that grew up with that stuff, and now that the people that created that stuff are departing this planet, they're just repackaging, and then something new will come at some point. Let's hope it's as good as it was 50 years ago.